Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in AP English, and we turn now in our study of Homer's Iliad to book 15. This one Fagles will call the Achaean armies at bay. We've already commented on the longest day of books 11 through 15, technically books 11 through 18, but for sure these books of 11 through 15 are going to set the tone for everything that follows. And here we'll be, of course, paying close attention to the end of this book and the ways in which we're going to have this very interesting little subtle passage in book 15 that says that Patroclus has decided he's got to hurry to get to Achilles' tent to let Achilles know something has got to be done. That will, of course, in the end, kind of set the stage for the back end of the Iliad. In many ways, I like to think about the Iliad as happening in three parts. Part 1 is kind of everything that happens up to book 11, and then book 11 through book 15 is kind of like that middle third of the fighting that goes on, and ostensibly the Greeks are beginning to lose their way in the battles, and then finally we'll have in book 16 the return of the action with Patroclus and of course his death, that tragic death. Hey, let's do a quick review. If you haven't been following my lectures at learnstrong.net, go down that left-hand side, find the AP folder, and then let's do a quick kind of sense review of each one of those books. Book 1, of course, the invocation of the muse. We learn about the rage of Achilles and his falling out, of course, with Agamemnon over women, as we pointed out, right? 2 girls. Book 2, we've got Agamemnon's bad dream, which is to say Zeus tells him everything is going to be great, and of course it's a delusion. And the catalog of the ships and the chariots are an important part of this. Book 3, we have Paris versus Menelaus. We think the war might be over because Menelaus will be able to destroy Paris in a fight. But by book 4, no, we've got Zeus and Hera, and they're, of course, going to have their agreement that, no, in fact, Hera's going to allow for these Trojans to be completely slaughtered. And the way she does this is to go down, whisper to Pandarus, tell him to shoot at Menelaus. He does it, the idiot, and then we're back and the war's on again. Book 5, the Diomedes Aristeia. Again, the Aristeia is that important battle type moment. And in fact, Diomedes is so amazing that he wounds both Aphrodite and Ares, right? In book 6, we've said before, this is a really important book for us. Hector, back in the walls of Troy, his last time to be with Andromache, his wife, and Astyanax, his son, right? It's kind of tragic to realize this will be the last time they actually get to see and talk to him. Book 7, we've got Ajax versus Hector. We're going to come back to this. This is kind of one of those motifs that keep coming back again and again and again. The 2 great warriors, Ajax and Hector, they come to a truce in book 7. In book 8, we have Zeus and his famous scales, and the decision is made, right, that the Trojans are going to ascend, especially because of Hector. Book 9, crucial book for us. Agamemnon realizes through the help of Nestor, this was bad form to jack Achilles the way we did. Let's send Odysseus, Phinox, and Ajax to the tent of Achilles. There he is with Patroclus, and maybe he'll come back. Achilles will say no. We paused at the end of the book 9 lectures to give a review lecture. I called it Achilles' crisis of faith because I wanted to point out the ways in which Achilles is grappling, it seems to me in this poem. Achilles is grappling with this issue of the warrior code. The Team A, Scooby Snacks, honor, the stuff that you get while you're alive, and the kleos, or the glory, the stuff you get after you die. People talk about you. And it appears that Achilles has decided he doesn't care about either of those 2 anymore, which obviously means, right, both epistemologically and ontologically, well then what do I have to live for? What's the point of it all? Book 10, well, here we are with Diomedes and Odysseus doing their night raid, and of course they jack Dolan something terrible, right? Book 11, we've got Agamemnon's Aristeia, leading, of course, to Achilles is asking Patroclus to go and ask what's going on with Nestor. That will be the beginning of the end, right, at book 11. Book 12, as we said, the longest day begins. Book 12, well, we got the Trojans at the trench and then at the wall. We've got Hector's boulder, which is, of course, this amazing moment when he picks up this huge boulder and jacks the gates at the ramparts of the wall. At book 13, we have Poseidon, who taking the form of Chalcis, right, the Greek prophet, will encourage. We've got Hector taunting Paris, and then saying to Paris, let's go, we got to get into this thing. And then we have Hector's famous battle scream. In book 14, we just finished this book. This is, of course, the great book of sex and violence when they merge. We've got Hera seducing Zeus, and in the end, of course, Ajax will, because Zeus is asleep, right, at the end of the book, Ajax will jack Hector with this huge boulder on his chest and basically knocks him out of the battle, right? And without the help of Zeus, we're going to have issues. Well, the hope, as we've already said, is that you are doing your own annotative reading, and then you're coming to me to use these lectures. Again, our learning theory, such an important part of our lectures here, that challenge is to connect new information to old information in meaningful ways. And of course, we do that through our levels of reading and our annotative work. At level 1, what does the text say? At level 2, what does the text mean? 2A, themes, messages. 2B, here we're focusing on symbolism and irony. Although, jot this down, because I'm going to make some comments here about the epic simile. Now, I know I've commented about this, epic simile that can go on and on and on forever, that comparison of often two unlike things. But we're going to find a compelling simile here that will lead me to make some observations to you about similes, and we'll have more to say about that in a second. But check this out. I mean, just write this down. This is fascinating. Along with symbolism and irony at 2B, we're going to comment really quickly on similes. There are 202 similes in the Iliad, scholars tell us. Of those 202, 164 have to do with battle scenes. The other 38 have to do with scenes outside of battle. That is a compelling stat. And we're going to obviously ask, why? Why so many similes that have to do with battle and fighting? I think we've got some answers that we can appropriate. Finally, at level 3, how can I relate to this information in some meaningful way at 3A other texts, beginning, of course, with the preceding books of the Iliad, right? And then finally, how can I relate this information to myself? This, again, is what we call owning the text. Can I say this out loud? Think of it. At book 15, there are 24 books in the Iliad, right? At book 15, you ought to be able now to get a pretty good sense of how to read this stuff and how to have some sense or understanding of how you can own this stuff. I'm hoping already, and I know that several of you have commented on this, so I know this is true, that you're already beginning to form some critical opinions about this text. Again, you can't have those opinions without actually having read the text, okay? And I would say enjoying the text. Not just reading summaries, but actually working through the text. In other words, if you haven't been reading this text, but you just been listening to me talk about it, I challenge you to try and pick up Iliad 15, read it for yourself, and see how well you do, all right? Speaking of Iliad 15, let's do a quick summary, as we like to do, and then we'll get into the actual lines. Well, if book 14 was about Zeus being seduced by Hera and going to sleep so that, for example, Ajax could jack Hector, book 15 is Zeus wakes up, and boy, oh boy, does he wake up. When he wakes up, he is awfully upset at Hera. He threatens her. We'll get to that one. We've seen this before where he threatens Hera, and we find out that in this book, we find out that he has treated Hera really badly. She has a good reason to really loathe this man who is her brother and her husband, right? Hera will swear that it wasn't her. She lies. Zeus will order Hera to go and find Iris and Apollo, send them both to him. He will be telling Iris that she needs to go down and talk to Poseidon and tell him to knock it off in terms of helping the Greeks. And Apollo needs to go and heal Hector because he's vomiting blood and is knocked out. Okay. Also, in a passage that we will read, Zeus will predict the end of it all. Not just the end of the Iliad, but the end of Troy. And it will be here that we have a whole lot of a sense of kind of how this thing's all going to unfold. Well, Apollo does just that. He heals Hector. Hector will in fact say, I thought I was dead. Iris will have a very interesting exchange with Poseidon, where Poseidon will in fact say, no, I ain't listening to what he has to say, and Iris will be the voice of reason. In the same way that Hera will go back to Mount Olympus, and she'll make a very interesting comment to Ares about the fact that his son has died. And Ares doesn't know because he's been staying out of the battle. And Ares will be ready to jack Zeus. And in fact, it will be Athena that will say, I think that's a very bad idea. You definitely don't want to do that. The fight at the ships with Hector is how we finish this thing. He is ready to say, let's burn the ships on fire. Apollo will knock down the walls and the ramparts as like a sandcastle, like a kid walking along the beach and kicking a sandcastle. Again, this is that remarkable simile study that we'll be looking at. We're going to have a very interesting exchange at line 460. This isn't a very long one, where Patroclus is is helping a wounded soldier, and he turns to him and says, I have to get going. I have to get back to Achilles. I have to talk with him. We have some serious problems. Setting up, obviously, Book 16 here in a bit, right? Book 15 will end with Ajax defending the ships, and it will soon be over, right? It will soon be over if something doesn't change. The Greeks are ready to lose this war, in other words, because once they light the ships, I mean, think about this. The ships are made out of wood. Once you light the ships all on fire and they all catch on fire and burn out, the Greeks have no way to get home, and the Trojans could just slaughter them, right? All right, let's go to work now. I will say, as I've said in all these lectures, I wish that I could just read this whole thing and, you know, we could work as we go. Unfortunately, I cannot, but there are some lines, obviously, that I want to read. Let's begin with the opening lines, and I'm going to actually do what I haven't done before, though, and I am going to enjoy reading a few lines. I'd like to work all the way up to roughly line 100. So as I work, we'll annotate, but I want to pay attention to some of this back and forth here, and and make some observations. Back through jutting stakes and across the trench they fled. The Trojans are running, and hordes were cut down at the Argives' hands. The rest, only after they reached the chariots, stood fast, blanched with fear, whipped in desperate flight. So in other words, the Greeks, it seems, are on the ascendancy now. That moment, Zeus awoke on the heights of Ida, the mountain where, of course, he was. Stretched out by Hera, queen of the golden throne, he leapt to his feet. Let's just pause for a moment. This leaping to his feet, it's a motif of the Iliad. I don't know if you'll remember it, but when Odysseus and Ajax and Phaeax come to visit Achilles in Book 9, we're told he jumps to his feet, his harp still in his hand. It's a nice touch. We're told that, for example, when Nestor showed up, long before the war began, and invited Patroclus and Achilles to come, that Achilles was very quick to jump to his feet. So here we go. Zeus leaps to his feet. He saw the Trojans and Achaeans, one side routed, the other harrying them in panic, Achaeans attacking, and the god Poseidon led the way. Zeus saw Hector sprawled on the battlefield, his comrades kneeling round him as he panted, struggling hard for breath, his senses stunned, vomiting blood. The man who'd struck him down was not the weakest Argive. At the sight of Hector, the father of men and gods, filled with pity, which is fascinating because Zeus doesn't seem to have much pity for anybody, right? Now, and shooting a terrible glance down at Hera, burst out at her. What a disaster you create. Uncontrollable Hera, you and your treachery. Now, every time it seems that Zeus is talking with Hera, he treats her in a really wretched way. We saw this in Book 1. We see it here again. Halting Hector's assault and routing Hector's armies. I wouldn't be surprised, my queen, if you were the first to reap the pernicious whirlwind you have sown. I'll whip you stroke on stroke. Whoa! So here we've got this, really nasty speaking of Zeus towards his wife. Don't you recall the time? And now he's going to go back in time. Very similar to going back in time about all the women that he slept with when he was telling Hera how he was so excited to sleep with her. Now he's going to go back and tell of another time. Don't you recall the time I strung you in mid-air? Line 23. Strung you in mid-air and slung those two massive anvils down from your feet and lashed both hands with a golden chain you could not break. You hung her upside down from Mount Olympus. There in the clouds and high, clear sky, you dangled. And the mighty gods on steep Olympus raged away, impotent. By the word rage here is also the word that goes back to the very beginning, single goddess, the rage of Achilles. What could they do to set you free? In other words, I jacked you and there was nothing any of the other gods could do. Standing there helpless. And any god I caught, I'd seize and send him plunging over the ramparts, head first, till he hit the earth barely alive. Not even then would the stark grief of Hercules release my breaking heart, my own godlike son. Hercules, by the way, has been mentioned a number of times in this text. It's interesting to go back and study when he's mentioned and why he's mentioned, right? Of course, the son of Zeus. You, with the north wind's help, had coaxed the gales to send him scudding over the barren salt sea. You, always plotting miseries for my son. You bore him off to the crowded town of Kos. But there I saved him, whisked him away to safety, back to the stallion land of Argos, worn with torment. I will help you, remember. You'll give up your treacheries. You will see if your warm embraces serve you, then your bed of lust where you sank me in your arms. Down from the gods you came to waylay me. You seduced me blind. Notice there's no mention at all by Zeus that I'm kind of an idiot. for participating in this kind of a farce because I should have known that you had it out. None of that. Zeus never takes responsibility for his own actions. He just says to Hera, I'm going to jack you something awful if you do this. Her eyes wide. We're always told this when Hera's speaking with Zeus, like, what? Me? Are you serious? It's not me at all. Her eyes wide. Queen Hera shuddered before his thunder, protesting, swearing a flight of winged oaths. She says, Earth be my witness now, the vaulting sky above and the dark cascading waters of the Styx. I swear by the greatest grimmest oath that binds the happy gods, by your sacred head, by the bed of our own marriage, that I at least would never take in vain. I would never mess around on you the way you mess around on me. Never by will of mine did the god of earthquakes, Poseidon, wreak havoc among the Trojan ranks and Hector and surged to help their foes. It wasn't me at all. It was Poseidon. I didn't have anything to do with it at all, right? Again, Hera again, capable of swearing and lying. We get that subtle message, right, that men will of course use always when they pick up the Iliad through the years to say, women, every time they speak, they're lying. Well, you could make the argument, Hera kind of has to help herself out. It's not like she's getting any help from her man, right? It must be his own great rage that drives him on. He pitied the sight of Argives penned against their ships. Not I. Why, I'd be the first to counsel him to take your lead, Zeus, wherever you command, my king of the black cloud. A rousing appeal. And the father of men, at line 60, and gods, looked down, smiled. It is a fascinating study to simply do a word study of the word smile or smiled in the Iliad and see when it happens and how it happens. Zeus here, smiling. And he took command with a flight of winging orders. Now he's going to give her some orders. Excellent Hera. Now, if in the years to come you will accord with me, my wide-eyed queen, throned with me in the gods' decisive sessions, then Poseidon, bent as he is to go his own way, must change at once and wrench his will to ours, to yours, and mine united. It's fascinating in the Iliad how Zeus has others do his work for him. He won't go to Poseidon, he sends Iris. He won't go to Apollo, he sends Hera. You're going to see how this works. So then Hera, if you mean what you say, down to the last word, go back now to the deathless tribes of gods and summon Iris to come before my presence, summon Apollo too, lord of the famous bow. Iris will fly to Achaea's bronze-armed troops and direct the god who shakes the earth, Poseidon, to stop, to quit the war and to return to his own ocean halls. And let Apollo drive Prince Hector back to battle. Breathe power back in his lungs. Make him forget the pains that rack his heart. Let him whip the Achaeans in headlong panic rout and roll them back once more, tumbling back on the oar-swept ships of Peleus' son Achilles. And he will launch his comrade, Achilles. Now here we come. Zeus is predicting the end of this project. Achilles will launch his comrade, Patroclus, into action, and glorious Hector will cut him down with a spear in front of Troy. Once Patroclus has slaughtered whole battalions of strong young fighting men, and among them all, my shining son, Sarpedon. Now that's going to be a fascinating scene. Put it in your notes. Later we're going to look for this. When Sarpedon is about to be killed, Zeus will want to save him. It will be Hera, who he's talking to now, who will say, can't do it. Here, Zeus does see the future. Sometimes Zeus can't see the future. Like, for example, he doesn't know that his wife is going to seduce him and rob him of his ability to have any control over what's going on, and therefore Hector almost dies. He doesn't see that coming. This he does see coming. And he's telling Hera, I want you to back off, because in the end, well, let's keep reading. And then, enraged for Patroclus, line 85, brilliant Achilles will bring Prince Hector down. The end of the Iliad actually will end there, right? And then, from that day on, this is the post-Iliadic story, I'll turn the tide of war. Back the fighting goes, no stopping it, ever. All the way till the Achaean army sees the beetling heights of Troy through Athena's grand design. Now this grand design of Athena will of course make some gesture towards Odysseus and his famous horse, or for the Monty Python fans in the house, right, large wooden badgers and all that. But, to finish, line 90, till that hour I will never cease my anger, nor will I permit a single immortal god to save the Argive forces, not till Achilles' prayer has been fulfilled. So I vowed at last. I bowed my head in assent that day to goddess Thetis, clutch my knees, begging me to exalt Achilles, scourge of cities. So in other words, here we go. So we've got Zeus, who will wake up. He's mad, but then he will give us his predictions, and this will allow for us to know, wow, this is the way it goes. Hera makes her way back to the gods in a fascinating scene. Let's take a look at that one in line 123 or so, right? She comes back to the gods. We are told, and this is fascinating, that the gods looked grim throughout the halls of Zeus. But we're told that Hera smiled with her lips only, her forehead furrowed over her dark brows as her anguish rose and she addressed all the gods. What fools we are, storming against Zeus. We are mad, and still we engage him, trying to block his way with a word or show of force. But there he sits, off and away, with never a care or qualm for us, claiming that he, among the deathless gods on high, is first in strength and power, none in the world his rival. So each of you here must take what blows he sends. Why, Ares, I gather, has just received his share. His son is dead in battle, his dearest son, Asclepius. Doesn't invisible Ares claim to be his father? Well, this is fascinating. In book 13, line 600, in a very, very brief, I mean, this is not a very long passage. We're told that the Trojan Deiphobus, taking aim at line 600 with his big lean spear, forever hating the man he hurled and missed again, but Deiphobus hit Asclepius with that shaft. Asclepius, son of the butcher god of battles, Ares. The heavy spear shaft ran him through the shoulder, and down he thundered, scraping, clutching the dust. But the giant bellowing Ares had heard nothing yet of how his son went down in the mounting carnage. On a crest of Olympus, under golden clouds, he sat. The god of war held fast by the will of Zeus.